So Contrabean's a home-based business. It's a coffee roasting business. We take a lot of care sourcing our beans, being concerned with traceability back to origin, and making sure that we select coffees that are not only very good tasting, but that they have some sort of social or environmental aspect to them as well, so that they're benefiting the coffee growing communities, giving a fair wage, helping people in the beginning of the supply chain.
Okay, excellent. And how long have you been doing this?
I've been roasting coffee for about 15 years. Contraband as a business has been around for 3 years now.
Okay, excellent. So did you choose this location based on wanting to have a home business out of it, or did it just happen to work out for you?
No, the location was purely driven by lifestyle choices, wanting to be in the old Westmount neighborhood. Having this studio space was a priority. My wife being a potter, we needed a place that she could set up her practice, and then we built it large enough that I can put a small coffee roaster in.
Okay, excellent. And how did Contraband start out as a business?
So it started, it has roots back in the 70s when I spent some time in Europe and experienced fresh roasted coffee for the first time. I was billeted on a farm, and the woman of the farm roasted coffee every week, and so I experienced sort of something different than the instant coffee which I had at the time. And it wasn't until about 40 years later when a friend, or 30 years later, a friend brought me some fresh roasted coffee that he'd done on a hot air popcorn popper, that I'd really experienced good coffee again. So then I started a quest to figure out how I could roast good coffee at home, and then slowly scaled it up to a small commercial practice.
Okay, excellent. So do you deal with businesses in your sales, or is it people directly coming to buy?
It's primarily an online business. I use Shopify as a platform, another sort of KW success story. Majority of my clients are subscribers, like the old Columbia Record Club. They'll get fresh coffee every 2 weeks or every 4 weeks. I ship from coast to coast, and some customers down in the States. Local folks can contact me, reach out through the website, and they can drop by and buy coffee gear or fresh roasted coffee. I do supply a couple small cafes in town and in Southern Ontario.
Oh, fantastic. Seems like you're doing really well then.
For a small business, yeah.
Yeah, excellent. So, a home-based coffee roasting business sounds like a really unique idea. Tell me a little bit about the business format, and, how does it work, and how come you decided to do it this way rather than having a commercial location, let's say?
Sure. So being home-based, I have a little lower overhead. The biggest investment, aside from the coffee roaster, which we have a small commercial roaster in front of us here, is the green coffee itself. By not having the overhead of a retail bricks and mortar location, I can spend more money on the green coffee, which means that I'm buying typically a higher quality coffee, and ensuring that the farmers that I'm getting my coffee from are getting a fair price for their coffee. I buy either direct from the farmers, or I work with one importer, so there are as few middlemen as possible. So essentially, I have to be conscious of the price point for specialty coffee that my competitors and especially roasters in town in Southern Ontario are selling for. So having that final price point in mind, I can typically buy something that's maybe a little bit more expensive and a little higher quality than they'd be able to, because they've got the added overhead.
Okay, excellent. And what would you say are some of the disadvantages of doing this from home?
Scale. This is about as big a home roaster as I could accommodate. It does 2 kilograms at a time. It only takes about 12 minutes to roast, but I can do about probably 5 to 6 kilos an hour. If I was to go to a commercial roaster in a bricks and mortar location, I could get a 10 kilogram machine or 15 kilogram machine, which just means that I'd be able to have greater capacity and spend less time roasting.
Awesome. How much coffee do you make, or do you roast on a weekly basis?
It varies from as low as 50 pounds to 150 pounds of coffee a week.
Okay. Wow.
This is the busy season. People are getting coffee for gifts and things like that. So
yeah.
Between now and the end of the month, I think I'll be probably roasting on the order of 600 or 700 pounds of coffee in December.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's quite a bit.
Yeah, it'll keep me busy at 5 pounds a batch. So.
Yeah, excellent. Do you want to maybe tell us a little bit about some of the products that you feature and some things that you really enjoy, maybe one of your favorites?
Sure. We try and establish relationships with the farmers. When we can, we like to be able to go and visit the farmers as well. And there's a farm in Guatemala called Finca Esperanza, and they're distributing under the brand Two Birds Coffee. It's a small family farm. We visited them in Guatemala once, but we see them once or twice a year, sort of socially in different locations. They've been farming coffee on that region for probably 150 years, but only in the last 12 years have they been organic. And more recently, they've got a status called bird-friendly status, which is sort of a notch above organic, and it respects migratory birds and nesting habitat on the farm as well. So it's a Smithsonian designation. There are fewer sort of bird-friendly farms in the world than there are organic farms. She also spends a lot of time giving back to the community. She's part of a program called Maya Cert, which is a gender equity program, and it guarantees women are paid equal wages to men. Most of the coffee industry in the world, at the farm level, the majority of the workers are women, and so gender equity and pay equity is very important. So we have a bag here. Coffee comes in 60 or 70 kilogram bags of green coffee, and we buy direct from her 2 boys who run the distribution in North America. So that's special to us because we've really formed a good friendship with the farm, and their coffee is becomes better and better every year as they work on products.
Okay, that's fantastic. So you don't have to sacrifice quality or any of that, just to be fair and take care of the environment as well as the employees that are working with you.
That's right.
So I just want to circle back a little bit. How does for our listeners, how do you make sure that the farms you're working with have all the certifications you're talking about? That they're
There's a tremendous level of trust. Visiting the farm is often that's sort of the way that you can really look them in the eye and make sure they have that. But especially coffee, they try and set themselves aside from apart from what's called commodity coffee, the general sort of corner store donut chain coffees, which is the bulk of the market. Farmers are getting less than $1 a pound US for that coffee. Especially coffee costs more to grow, and they're getting $3 and up per pound. So they're investing back into their community and their practices. So proof of certification, being able to show us what they've got, following up with organizations like Smithsonian to see, in fact, if they are registered with them. And just it's a very it's an exciting community to be part of. There's lots of there's a good global special coffee community, and you can't pretend for too long if you're trying to make a name for yourself. It ultimately would hurt them if any farmer, they want to get as much money as they can for their product. So they have to be forthright with their certifications.
Yeah, that makes sense. And what is it that makes coffee farm bird friendly? I myself don't know.
So most coffee is grown like any other agricultural crop with lots of chemical crop inputs. You have to be organic, first of all, and you've had to operate without pesticides and chemical fertilizers for a set period of time. Once you've got your organic certification, then you can reach out to the Smithsonian Institute in the States. They will come out and they will tell you the requirements for bird friendly. That typically, organic requires a certain amount of tree coverage because coffee likes to grow at high altitudes but in shade. So to go to bird friendly, there are requirements as to how you prune those trees and how you make nesting and migratory bird habitat available. So it's all around really the tree cover and maintaining that cover, and which all goes to a sort of a healthier ecosystem.
Okay, fantastic. Circling back to the coffee itself, how does one tell how high quality a coffee bean is, or the coffee that they're drinking? Is it high quality or?
Yeah, well, there's an organization called the Specialty Coffee Association. There's American and European and other chapters around the world. They've established a common language for assessing coffee quality. There's this standard protocol that tells you how you roast the coffee, how you grind the coffee, then how you brew and have you taste the coffee. And there's about 10 different categories, each with a 1 to 10 scale that you can check off: aroma, fragrance, taste, mouthfeel, balance. And there is a status of sort of training called Q grader, quality grader, that everyone is essentially striving to describe coffees using the same language and the same protocols. Once you score a coffee on those 10 different categories, if the total cumulative score adds up to 80 or more, it's considered specialty coffee.
Okay.
The idea of the Q grading program is that you have people trained under a standard process, and that each of them would be given the same coffee, whether they're in Canada or the US or Europe, and they should grade that coffee to within this half a point, sort of before a point of one another.
Oh wow, and it usually comes out that way?
Yeah, pretty well. It's very subjective, coffee tasting,
Yeah.
but there's a common language being developed, and coffee is graded using that system at various stages along the way. It's graded on the coffee farm to see how they're doing, so they'll tell a coffee roaster, I have a coffee that scores 86. You'll get a pre-shipment sample. I'd roast it up, cup it, see what I thought of it, and then I'll get the coffee will ship to me. I'll cup it again when I get it, see if it scores the same way, and then you work on either hopefully improving the taste of that coffee through the roast, as long as you've got it. So,
And it's just black coffee, nothing added? Or-
yeah, it's entirely black coffee. It's probably closest to a French press type. It's what's called immersion. You put a certain amount of grinds in a small cup, you add hot water to them. Over the course of 20 minutes, you taste, and the coffee flavor changes over that time as coffee cools. Coffee tends to get sweeter as it cools, and then in the end, you've got a score that you put on that coffee, and that, in the grand scheme of things, the higher the score, the more money a coffee farmer will get for their coffee, and it usually means greater care on the coffee farm is required in order to get a higher scoring coffee.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So being a coffee professional yourself, do you drink your coffee black or do you add?
We drink, if I'm drinking a brewed coffee, I always drink it black. If I'm we drink a lot of espresso-based coffees. Typically we'll have them like a flat white with a bit of foamed milk with them. So,
Cool. Good to know. Now, circling back to the region of Kitchener-Waterloo, what is it that you enjoy most about living in Kitchener-Waterloo, your neighborhood, and what is it like running a business here?
Okay, so we like the small town feel. I did my undergrad here. We left for Calgary. We're both from Toronto, but we ultimately came back here. We've raised our kids here. It's nice to be able to walk around and recognize and know people and establish sort of friendships. But it's a small community, even though it is 250,000 people over the Tri-Cities. It still feels small. The hustle and bustle isn't there. It's also a dynamic community, having the two universities here and the college. It's nice because you get you really benefit from the advancements on the college, the tech startups, influx of young people coming into this neighborhood. As a small business owner in coffee, my customers who are in your sort of demographic, they're very concerned about what they're eating and what they're consuming, and they like to know traceability and where their stuff comes from. So it's nice to have an educated customer that is really interested in getting in and learning a bit more about the coffee rather than just going to a grocery store and buying a bag. So it's along the lines of craft brewing and things like that. There are a lot of people in the coffee supply chain, and there are a lot more important people than the roaster, and people are interested in that story.
Yeah, it's important, and I'm happy to see that our demographics here support that, and there's people such as yourself that take care of their business rather than just worrying about the bottom line at the end of the day.
Yeah, and you see a flurry. There's coffee has become and coffee drinking outside the home is a growing sort of part of the retail market to see a lot of cafes popping up. We're seeing a change. It used to be that everyone was very closed and protective of their product, and they didn't want to have collaboration. They saw it as more of a threat to customer base. Now we're seeing a sort of the shift, what we see in the States, where it's a very collaborative community. It's moving up to Canada slowly. So coffee roasters and cafe owners are talking more with the ultimate goal of building client base. So we have a coffee roasters forum in town where we've got what would be considered my competitors in one sense. But we get together and we share our knowledge of coffee roasting, and we help young roasters improve their roasting practices, and then we also network into other aspects of the coffee industry. So you can do that in a small town, sort of this community.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
I love that. We have a few fun questions for you, but before we get to that, you maybe want to tell me a little bit about this machine and how it works.
So this is called a drum roaster. It's essentially like a gas barbecue. It's got burners underneath. It runs off of natural gas or propane. Inside, and it's hard to see, but there's a large spinning drum in there. Heat's applied to the bottom. The green coffee is dropped in the top here, and over the course of about 10 to 15 minutes, the coffee is roasted. It's set up with temperature gauges throughout, and I have a computer program that monitors temperature. Each coffee has what's called a roast profile. It's essentially a recipe for how you cook that coffee, how you from when it goes in the roaster until when it drops out the end. So you can control airflow, and you can control the amount of gas. You're ultimately trying to make sure that you roast the coffee to bring out that coffee's unique flavors, and you can really fine-tune a coffee, add balance, add flavor, depending on how the roast profile works. So, and then this is a cooling tray. Coffee reaches a temperature of about 420 degrees Fahrenheit in the roast. When it drops out, you have to cool it very quickly. So it comes into this tray, which has a fan and a stir, and cold air is sucked down, and the beans will cool in about 3 or 4 minutes. And then that essentially stops the roasting process. Mm-hmm. And then you can repeat that with about 10 minutes or so between batches.
Awesome. Thanks so much for explaining that. I've had many coffees myself, but never knew.
Well, that was a sort of a
quick
condensed notes.
Yeah.
But, you can go into big coffee shops or big coffee roasteries, and you'll see something that is very much the same size. It's just a matter of scale. They all operate on the same principles: applying heat and sucking the air and smoke out.
Yeah, fantastic.